Much of his current work is focused on creating opportunities for innovation and collaboration and in advancing new thinking and policy approaches. Sandy has also been instrumental in the establishment of a number of Canadian non-for-profits. He is currently the founding chair of the Community Food Centres Canada and was the founding chair in the Friends of the Greenbelt Foundation, which is an active file at the moment, an arm's-length public foundation created by the Government of Ontario to support environmental and agricultural integrity of the province's new Greenbelt. He is the director of Tides Canada Foundation and the Toronto Community Foundation and past chair of Philanthropics Foundation Canada. He also continues to serve as an advisor to a number of charitable organizations. Finally, he's a senior fellow at the Massey College. Thank you for being here with us, Sandy. Charlotte Greenland is the youngest daughter of Freddie and Bella Greenland. She is an, oh my God, Edita Gwitchin. Again, you're going to have to correct me. On her father's side, and Vuntut Gwitchin on her mother's side. Charlotte was raised in Aklavik and enjoyed most of her childhood summers in Old Crow in the Yukon. She spent much of her early years on the family trapline in the Mackenzie Delta, as well as on family hunting trips to the Porcupine River, learning the Gwich'in lifestyle from her parents and elders and grandparents in her communities. She is passionate about youth wellness and is an advocate for reconnecting and strengthening cultural practices as the foundation of community health and identity. She completed a Master's of Education degree from Acadian University and served within the education field for 12 years. She is currently the Chief Operating Officer for the Gwich'in Tribal Council and lives in Inuvik, Northwest Territories with her husband Pat and their dog Jake. Thank you for being with us, Charla. And of course, last but not least, our friend Nicole. Nicole has spent over 22 years in the federal public service in the areas of protected areas, environment, assessment, ecosystem health, and Indigenous reconciliation, as well as provincial territorial relations. Nicole is currently the Director General for Protected Areas Directorate within the Canadian Wildlife Service at Environment and Climate Change Canada. She started her career in Vancouver with Environment and Climate Change Canada and moved to Ottawa about 14 years ago, where she's also spent time working with Health Canada and Natural Resources Canada. Nicole is originally from Vancouver and holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from the University of Victoria and a Master's in Leadership and Training from Royal Roads University. She's passionate about facilitation, diversity, and collaborative decision-making, and she approaches life and policy with a humor and an eye for detail. I do also, speaking of natural resources, I do want to take a special moment to note the loss of our friend and colleague, Mr. Jim Carr, who unfortunately passed away today. Minister Carr was a great advocate for Guardians. I'll never forget meeting him, and he helped us a great deal in the Indigenous movement, and I just want to note about his loss. It's a great loss for our country, and our thoughts are with his friends and family at this time. So, before we get into the conversation, we thought we'd take a time to show you a little video that'll explain a little bit more about what PFPs are and how they can work in the Northwest Territories.
There's an exciting opportunity underway in the Northwest Territories known as the PFP opportunity. PFP is short for Project Finance for Permanence, which is an exciting opportunity to explore investments for conservation, protected areas, and a host of other exciting things. It means bringing together representatives from Indigenous governments, the Government of the Northwest Territories, the Government of Canada, and representatives of donor organizations. At the heart of it is protected and conserved areas, and how the NWT could step up and help meet important global mandates around protecting land and water, particularly how it links into the 30 by 30 mandate. I think the NWT is poised to make a really significant contribution to Canada and to the world by helping to meet these 30 by 30 targets. And I would even go as far to say that without support from folks within Indigenous communities, likely the world won't be able to meet these targets, and I don't think Canada would. So I think our leadership is necessary in the conversation, but it's not just about protecting hectares. It's about transforming lives. Everything from Indigenous Guardian and Indigenous-led stewardship programming to health and wellness, language and culture revitalization programs. economic development opportunities. This is the reason why Indigenous peoples and our leadership are engaged in taking care of land and water. It's to protect who we are as Indigenous people now and into the future, and to ensure that we have a healthy, thriving landscape, because we need a healthy, thriving landscape to be strong in our cultures. In the summer of 2021, the Indigenous Leadership Initiative and our partners within the International Boreal Conservation Campaign took up the responsibility to try and catalyze a conversation for a PFP in the NWT. And what we heard was that Indigenous governments in the North have a large ambition when it comes to taking care of land and water. Across the board, unanimously by the fall of 2021, all partners had confirmed an interest to explore this together. And at that point, we initiated a bit of a virtual engagement around the PFP with Indigenous governments. What was really exciting for our team is that there was such consistency across Indigenous governments about what this opportunity could support. And why that's exciting is that in the North, we operate by consensus. We're consensus-based governments, both Indigenous and our territorial government. And it's where we agree with each other that magic can really happen. We are enabling the bridge between Western and Indigenous ways of understanding the world around us so that we can explore impactful solutions for big challenges like climate change. And for me, what's exciting about this opportunity is it helps nurture that conversation and helps do it in a way that enables Indigenous leadership in that discussion and helps pave a way for a more hopeful future. In my own experiences, I've seen the impact that investments in this work can have. When we invest in guardian programming and when we invest in Indigenous leadership and stewardship and conservation, it has a direct impact on the individuals engaged in that work. That impact grows beyond those individuals. It grows into our communities, it grows into our regions, it grows across the entire territory. And what I've come to learn as a result of these discussions is that impact can then grow across the country and really around the world.
Here's our... And I'm actually going to join you down there instead of being up here, but I think there's only one mic between us. Is that the case? So we'll have to... Oh, you all got one. Okay. Thank you. That could be a problem. So the first question is for Grand Chief Lafferty. And Danny, we'll start with Grand Chief Lafferty. You know, what are your nation's ambition around conservation, stewardship, and economic development?
Merci. A question de John Leon, Guga prayer song I la, Yanti Merci Wisi. The good now. Ya chỉ thuần sa đi trên cái vô tiếng đấy, ấy cái ta mất sinh hoạt đấy, ấy là trong cái 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 ya đấy, mất đi mất sinh này gì, ta ấy cái chỉ tiếng ta trong cái in ta在cái quân này cái ta asi hú đi trong cái thì sa đi để thì anh ấy, vô hú đi trong cái ta nãy cái cái đua trong cái nãy cái ya trên tiếng đấy, ấy là ta mất sinh hoạt đấy. Ta asi chọn government trong cái đó asi chọn cái là trái đó đấy, ta ya giao cái ya tiếng đấy. Anh nói gì liên hệ trong ethical cái ta on ta cái thà, trên cái đó trong cái mà sự cái phong đấy. Trong一个trong那这个的安排tiếng đấy. First of all, I'd just like to say merci for that introduction. That was a bit long introduction, but it was good. I just want to say thank you to Leon Andrews for that prayer song. It's always been in our tradition, and we still continue to carry that message forward. Our ancestors have carried that forward, and we continue to hold that. And out of respect in our tradition is recognizing our elders. Even though we're coming from different communities, we have 33 communities in Northwest Territories. And Leon and Ethel come from the Sahtu. Sahtu got in So they come from a very traditional community. I just want to say thank you for being here with us. They're very well-respected elders, so must see for that. And I have to recognize Steve Nita, who's an up-and-coming elder to be soon enough in training. Steve and I go back since our politician days and Divic days. So I just want to say thank you for being here as well. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here today. This is a very important milestone for all of us. And I can only speak to the Clinchon Nation, Clinchon government perspective. And my name is Jackson Lafferty. I'm a Grand Chief for Clinchon government, based out of course, Northwest Territories. We serve four traditional communities. And, as part of being Clinchon and then also Clinchon government, we're the stewards of the land, the waterways, and the wildlife throughout our traditional territory called Mufiga Denitle. Ever since at the beginning of time, our land claims and self-government has been finalized in 2005, and it's been almost 20 years, almost 2 decades. And there's been a lot of work that still unfinished business that we continue to strive at. With the modern treaty, the way it's written out, and we have a greater say, a greater recognition, a full autonomy, full authority, and our jurisdictions in the Northwest Territories. With our Clinchon government, we own 39,000 square kilometers of surface and subsurface lands within the Mufiga Denitle, that's our traditional territory. And we also, we believe in true partnership. So we have to go co-manage our lands, our resources within the Wik-Agi land protected area, which is also within our Mufiga Denitle territory. I think Aaron will probably speak to that a bit down on the co-management. The Clinchon government also were involved with very exciting, great opportunities in the Northwest Territories when it comes to on the land program, because we are in our jurisdiction steward of our land within the Mufiga Denitle, and the reason I kept on saying Mufiga Denitle is part of our territory, so we're starting to recognize that even further within our constitution. And as a self-governing body, a Clinchon government, we do have the law-making authorities. Clinchon government is in the process of protecting our lands, our waterways, conserving biodiversity. It can also look different to what used to be seen across the great country of Canada and other places internationally. So we're doing things differently. Within the Clinchon government, we do have a variety of tools that we can work with. For the Clinchon government, we establish and also implement our own traditional laws and modern treaty laws. And again, I have to reiterate a true partnership. We cannot do this alone. We all have to work together. And I think that's a common theme, even last week's announcement by Prime Minister Trudeau, reiterating the partnership, reconciliation. So we have to work with our treaty partners. That's Government of Canada and Government of Northwest Territories, as well as other partners, Indigenous partners across the Northwest Territories and outside the Northwest Territories, our neighbors, to co-manage the lands and also the resources in the Northwest Territories and within the Mufiga Denitle. Our elders have always told us, protect what's yours, protect the land, the water, the animals. So taking care of our lands, the water, revitalizing our language, our cultural way of life are key priorities for our nation. Right up front of our own Clinchon Constitution, the agreement that was signed by 3 parties, It acknowledges that at Clinchon we have the responsibility to be the custodians of our land, the waters, and the resources. We also have witnessed the firsthand the decline of our caribou. And I believe some of the community members are here, witnessed that, and are living with it. There are many changes on our land and water. We have to live with these impacts across the Northwest Territories, and I believe our Nunavut counterparts are here as well. And so we also work with Nunavut jurisdiction as well, because that is our way of life. We have our own version of Indigenous Guardian Program. We call it Ekwanaho Deke, boots on the ground. We work very closely to Nunavut border, and obviously we've been visiting the Nunavut area as well. But it is guided by the traditional knowledge and the wisdom of our elders. Our ancestors have always shared information with us. Tell your stories and pass on the tradition. So that's what we're doing. We work with Clinchon harvesters, the caribou biologists, every year on the Bear Land. And we have direct observations and documentation of caribou movement, their behaviors, which has been affected by climate change, the global warming, all the temperatures that's changing, increase in insects, and industrial activities, and predators. And through our relationship with other Indigenous governments, also industries that are working in our backyard, also our partner GNWT, Government of Northwest Territories, we have been able to share what we have learned and to improve the caribou protection measures. We are also working hard to protect Dunawak Ehodi, a portion of the north arm of Great Slave Lake, which is the home of many species at risk in our jurisdiction. The Clinchon elders have described this important area as like a mother and a father to us. All the animals and plants are in it. It's our livelihood. And it is how we use the trails of our ancestors for many generations. Dunawak Ehodi is currently a Canada protected area under the Northwest Territories Protected Area Act. We have already protected many culturally environmental important areas on Clinchon lands within Mufiga Denitle. And that's part of our land use planning as well. We also conduct a variety of monitoring programs throughout our traditional territory of Mufiga Denitle based on Indigenous knowledge, Western science, including fish and water monitoring on Denegawak Ehodi and throughout the Marion watershed. Caribou harvesting. We have a monitoring program along the Tibet to Contweto winter road towards the diamond mines. Wildlife monitoring along the Clinchon Highway, the new Clinchon Highway 9 towards Wati in our jurisdiction. And we also carry out our annual training of our resource team, environmental monitoring, wilderness safety training, and culture and traditional skills that's badly needed in our jurisdiction. We keep our tradition trails alive with our trail clearing. There's a program in place and annual Trails of Our Ancestors canoe journeys. So we do a canoe journey every year to our communities that host the annual assemblies. And support for Clinchon citizens food gathering and on-the-land culture activities. Our approach is that we respect the interconnectivity of all living things. And we make decisions. Clinchon government makes a decision thinking about the needs of the future generations to come. The land is our home. It sustains us for generations and will continue to do so. And we need to take care of it. Keep it as healthy as we can and be healthy ourselves as Clinchon people, Clinchon Nation. We are also affected by the changing economy as resource development projects come and go in our backyard, Northwest Territories. Building self-sufficiency through economic development opportunities, including new and diverse business employment opportunity, is another great opportunity for the whole Northwest Territories, not just as a Clinchon Nation, but the whole Northwest Territories. The Clinchon has a vision. We always had a vision, strong like two people. That was described by our elder, the late elder Elizabeth Mackenzie, and also Chief Jimmy Bruno. This means that we need to keep our language, our cultural way of life, alive and strong as Clinchon. At the same time, we need to learn the Western knowledge and be able to participate in a modern economy. So that's what we call a true partnership that goes hand in hand, and we all must do this together as a community, as a region, as a territory, and the whole world. Masi.
Masi Cho, Grand Chief, and Danny, what are the Kashugochine ambitions around conservation, stewardship, and economic development?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and to tell my story. And I was just trying to do a little bit of introduction to myself, but apparently you did the job for me. So I worked for the oil and gas industry for many years, and before I decided to work for my community, not against my community. I just want to take a moment to help you all understand exactly where my community is. In the past, I've been to many meetings, and I've realized that people really do not know where we are and how remote we are. We are northwest of the Great Bear Lake, 20 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. I'm the executive director for the Kashugotin Foundation and a management arm of the Kashugotin Party to the establishment of the Indigenous Territorial Protected Area in Tsituli-Lin Tuyata, 10,000 square kilometers of land west of Fort Good Hope. What I would like you all to understand is that Tuyata is the Kashugotin. During the signing of Treaty 11 in 1911, Tuyata was brought up by our elders as a critical importance to the Kashugotin. Former chief elders and chair of the Tuyata Management Board, Frank DeCelli, who I think you've all met a couple of days ago, will tell you the story of the beaver on the Canadian nickel that came from Tuyata. Along with his family, he was born in the land, and he was born in Tuyata. It was talked about at the Berger Inquiry in the 70s and was slated as protected under the Satu Métis land claims of 1993. Our ancestors and elders who pushed for the protection of Tuyata. It is the breadbasket of our region due to the abundance of wetlands, moose, fish, ducks, and geese, and it goes to the foothills of the Mackenzie Mountains. Right through the middle runs an ancient trail that connects the barren lands to the mountains, and beyond that has been used for millennia. This past summer, we built a camp at a site on the Ramparts River where the elders told us to build it because it is an ancient campsite on a trail in the area. When we arrived, Frank was excited right on the shore there was an ancient trail marker deeply embedded into the riverbank made of large fossil rocks surrounded by small rocks. The establishment of Tuyata was made possible by partnership with and funding from the Government of Canada, ECCC, the Government of the Northwest Territories, the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, and the International Boreal Conservation Campaign, the Weiss Foundation, Ducks Unlimited. Now we also benefit from the funding support from Makeway, Heritage Canada, and the NWT on the Land Collaborative. From collaboration with other community organizations like the KG Self-Government Secretariat, the BAN, the Fort Good Hope Renewable Resource Council, with whom we work very closely. Our management board is 95% Kashowitan. With help from our GNWT partners and the protected area team, our draft management plan is entirely built around Kashowitan language, principles, values, and science. Because of the opportunities that these partnerships provide, the Kashowitan Foundation is the largest employer in my community. Just in each of the last 2 February to March seasons, we have hired over 100 people from Fort Good Hope and Cova Lake casual work, in addition to our full-time and regular positions. Our guardians, Twyla, John, Buddy, and Joseph, work with the community members and trusted Western Science to do water monitoring, permafrost monitoring, and run elder and youth cultural camps. They cut trails, harvest, and support on-the-land programs for other organizations in the community. We have provided training for many community members so they can work with us, but also be eligible for other opportunities. Our guardians have also been called for emergency response for flooding, COVID-19, and for search and rescue. Climate change is the biggest threat to our community and to Tuyata. Fire and permafrost thaw are significant challenges to our land. So too is the dramatic changing of seasonal norms, weather, and of water levels that make travel and economic activities on the land more dangerous and challenging. Using traditional knowledge of our elders as baseline, it is imperative that our team supports the community to spend as much time on the land as possible. So our dynamic Kashowitan knowledge of the land adapts to the land and the water changes. We want our people to know that land ancestors knew, and we want to use evolving technologies to adapt our knowledge and our ways forward, going forward. Our community is leading the way for the management and conservation of Tuyata. The announcement on December 7th by the Prime Minister Trudeau was very welcome. The NWT project PFP will help our community achieve our bright vision for our future with the collaboration of funding from Canada and the NWT, the funders. This work has been amazing for our community, and it does require significant funding. Our programs have meant a huge increase, economic opportunities right in our community, our opportunity to learn the land that the Kashowitan grew from. This is our identity. We take care of the land will take care of you. For more information, you can please check out our website, Masi.
Thank you so much, Danny. Aaron, what can you tell us about how the PFP is an opportunity and what it represents to you in terms of strengthening institutional relationships with Indigenous peoples in the Northwest Territories?
Thanks, Val. First, I'd just like to thank Leon for starting the meeting in a good way. I've been at many meetings with Leon, and it's always wonderful to have you begin them that way, so I really appreciate it. And thank you to ILI for this opportunity and the other panel members and all of you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Over the past 5 years, with the help of significant contributions from Canada's Nature Fund, territorial and Indigenous governments have had a great deal of success with conservation initiatives in the Northwest Territories. Since 2019, 2 new protected areas have been established, and significant work has been done to develop and expand guardian programs, purchase necessary equipment, deliver on the land programs as well as research and monitoring, support community well-being and healing, and develop local sustainable tourism. The initial funding that supported this work is ending this year, and new funding is needed to keep guardians employed, equipment running, and to keep delivering programs that are having positive social, ecological, and economic impacts on local communities, as well as the land, water, and wildlife in the Northwest Territories. We've seen the tangible benefits of a conservation economy in communities nearby new protected areas in our territory. For example, Lutzelk'e, the home of the Lutzelk'e Dene First Nation, is a community of about 300 mainly Indigenous residents that's located just outside the Thai-Dene Indigenous Protected Area and National Park Reserve. This community experienced a significant increase in median annual income for community members between 2015 and 2020, a time period of increased activity in negotiations toward the establishment of Thai-Dene in 2019. There you go, straight from Steve Nita. Similarly, there is anecdotal information about a significant increase in the number of jobs and annual income in the community of Fort Good Hope, located next to the Tuyata Indigenous and Territorial Protected Area. The PFP represents the possibility of continuing the hard work that has gone into building relationships and programs and expanding the successes that have already been achieved. The PFP is a unique opportunity for public and Indigenous governments to work together in developing and designing a potential long-term funding program. There are several ways that engaging in this kind of funding process strengthens our relationships. At each step of the PFP process, that has been agreed to in the NWT, consensus must be achieved before moving on to the next step. This pushes everyone to speak up, to listen, learn, and ultimately find an agreement that works for everyone. If the PFP is approved by all parties, the intent is that there will be shared decision-making between the territorial and Indigenous governments on how funding is allocated. This type of shared authority around funding allocation is part of creating and strengthening equitable relationships. In addition, the PFP could provide all parties with consistent long-term funding rather than one-year contribution agreements, which would allow Indigenous and territorial governments to spend less time applying for and reporting on funding, and more time on projects and programs that contribute to things like land stewardship, language revitalization, community well-being and healing, and food security, to name a few. With long-term funding, Indigenous governments will be in a better position to participate in co-management and operations, including funding community members to prepare for and participate in co-management, hiring and training staff, and developing and delivering programs, all of which are an expression of self-determination. Similarly, with long-term funding in place, the GNWT would be in a better position to work with Indigenous governments and Indigenous organization partners on developing collaborative plans and programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Sandy, the same question. What does this mean to you in terms of strengthening your relationships and institutional relationships with Indigenous peoples?
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation, and I'm honored to be with all of you today. So, as Val said in her introduction, I work for a Canadian foundation based out of Toronto. And we've had an environment program for a long time, but over the last number of years, we've been increasingly focused on Indigenous-led conservation as sort of the main strategy that guides our work. And the work is essentially rooted in our interest in the nexus of biodiversity, climate, and sustainable livelihoods. And as we think about those sort of three essential elements, it occurred to us, and it took us some time, that the fulcrum of that, the most important engine of that, was Indigenous-led conservation. So we have been finding our way into that work as a Toronto-based foundation for about the last 5 years, and increasing our sort of the level of our relationships with various nations, our level of trust. But we've been proceeding fairly slowly, and it's been a bit of a piecemeal exercise. I think for many Canadian funders, you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report was a was a watershed moment in shifting how people thought about the way they did their work within philanthropy in Canada. And that, coupled with everyone's increasing awareness of the climate and biodiversity crisis, I think has helped to start to shift the way people work. Certainly the way Metcalfe works has shifted over the last number of years. And over the last year and a half or so, I've been sitting at the table of funders around the emergence of the Northwest Territories PFP. And that's been an extraordinary opportunity for me because it's been an exercise at a level of scale and ambition, coupled with, I think, a real humbleness on the part of at least the funder community to be in an enabling and supportive position to a remarkable Indigenous-led, community-driven initiative. And so to be able to sit at that table and look at how conservation is being reinterpreted and deepened and made far more profound through the lens of the people who live on that landscape has really been hugely instructive for Metcalfe and has given us a far deeper appreciation of what that kind of stewardship economy and values-driven approach to a landscape can mean for protection strategies, for livelihood strategies, for cultural revitalization. So I think I can only say that for Metcalfe, it's been a profoundly educative experience, and also deeply exciting. I mean, I was here last week when the Prime Minister made his announcement, and the prospect of that level of funding enabling this level of ambition and revitalization and reimagining of landscapes in the North is extraordinary. So I think for philanthropy, for my philanthropy, I won't speak for all philanthropies, they're all very different. But for ours, it's been an extraordinary journey, and we've been guided by what we've been seeing on the landscape and within community, and greatly look forward to what's going to emerge out of this as we move into the years ahead, particularly next year. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Nicole. You know, the Government of Canada has deep ambitions in terms of conservation. We heard a lot about the 30 by 30 goal here at the COP. And recognizing the role of Indigenous peoples in caring for and managing lands and waters has been seen as central to achieving that. How do you see the PFP model contributing to the success of achieving the government's commitments to conservation, but also to reconciliation?
It's a great question. And first, I'd like to echo my thanks for the prayer, for starting us off. It's always a peaceful way to get going for hard topics sometimes. Not to today is a hard topic, but so I think for me and for the Government of Canada, PFP represents a new tool in our toolbox. There's a number of things that are out there that we can use to advance conservation, that we can use to advance reconciliation, but PFP really brings that together. It allows us to bring all of the partners to the table. And I think that's really important because some of the challenges we face elsewhere in the country is you move to a certain spot with one partner, and then for a variety of different reasons, you can't sort of take your ambition to the next level to achieve that protection. So the innovative model that PFP represents is that everybody is there. Others have talked about the consensus approach, hearing everyone at the table and not moving forward until we're all ready. And that, to me, leads us to a stronger and better commitment at the end, where we're going to see the ambitions of all the partners come to fruition, that we'll have the funding, the governance, the ambition, the structures, the culture, the history, all in one place, not in different pots of money that you need to apply over here, over multiple years, but that everyone is working in the same direction. The other thing that I think is really innovative and exciting about the PFP model is that it looks at landscapes in a much more holistic way. Not these little pockets of conservation here or there, pockets of economic development, but it really looks at what is this whole landscape approach to conservation, and recognizing that conservation is not just about protecting lands where no one can go again, It's about using the lands in a way that makes sense for the people and the activities that are on them, and bringing the language and the words to that landscape. And I think that's the really exciting part about the PFP and NWT as well, is that it's not just about landscape, because the landscape is within the people, which I think is one of my sort of greatest learnings over this process, and is the part of this that is really exciting. And that's the connection to reconciliation. It's about looking at people and communities and the land as a whole, holistic. Our Indigenous partners have known this for years, have been living this way for years, so we're coming along with you now. Thank you for being patient. But being able to look at how this all works together to sort of build new relationships with each other, new ways of working with each other that is beyond old models, that we can try out something different and make it work because we've got everyone at the table. So I think, to me, that's what this new tool, which isn't really a new tool, but a new way of using this tool in Canada, I think this is going to be one of the most exciting conservation tools that we have ahead of us. And it's exciting because each is going to be different. So the work we're doing here in the NWT is very different than work that was done previously in the Great Bear Rainforest, or is done differently in other parts of the world. That PFPs can be made to work for the environment and the people that are part of it. And so I think for Canada, that's one way that we're really jazzed, frankly. We're really jazzed about this. And so, yes, there was resources that were announced last week, and that's really exciting because we can't do this without resources. But I think that is just the iceberg of what we can do. We have some resources put aside now, and now is our opportunity to actually work together to develop those new relationships, those new models, and that new way of appreciating and understanding what conservation and land management is. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm excited to see a jazzed government here.
That wasn't in my speaking notes.
Oh, Charla, what does this work really mean, and how will it contribute to Gwich'in well-being and cultural longevity? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Masi, Dringwinzi Shilakat, Charla Greenland Valji, Shikai Patingmiak, Shahan Bala Greenland Vaji, Shati Freddy Greenland Vaji, Shahan Old Crow Gutsat Nali, Shati Aklavik Gutsat Nali, Shitsu Ellen and Robert Bruce Old Crow Gutsat Ginli, Shitsi Bala J and Joe Greenland Aklavik Gutsat Shitai Veiwan Ginli. Good day, friends. My name is Charla Greenland. My husband is Pat Tingmiak. My parents are Freddie and Bala Greenland of Aklavik. My mom is originally from Old Crow, Yukon, which makes me both Vantat and Editet Gwich'in. My maternal grandparents are the late Ellen and Robert Bruce of Old Crow, Yukon, and my paternal grandparents are the late Bala J and Joseph Greenland of Aklavik. I am happy to be here today and proud to introduce myself in the way that my grandma Ellen taught me. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Gwich'in Tribal Council and honored to be here today on behalf of Grand Chief Ken Kikavichik and the GTC. And I just also like to thank Leon and Ethel for being such a grounding force here today. It's a little nerve-wracking to be sitting up here, so that was, I really appreciate that, Masi. And it's also, thank you for the opportunity to be here and with such an esteemed group of panelists. So back to the question, how does this work contribute to your nation's well-being and cultural longevity? From a high-level perspective, this work restores our conservation economy, it strengthens Gwich'in values, and reestablishes a genuine system of knowledge transfer built on relationship and communication. For too many years, our strongest on-the-land knowledge holders were forced, or are forced, to be underemployed as the unique and significant skills they embody are not valid in the current colonial system. It is guardianship programs that can work to restore our conservation economy. It gets people back to the land and finally properly compensated and respected for the important work that they do. It strengthens the Gwich'in values and restores a genuine system of knowledge transfer, knowledge that has been a science, that has been a successful system, and an approach that has worked for millennia. Our Grand Chief Ken Kikavichik has shared that many of our old trails are overgrown and not kept, and the land is telling us it needs to be cared for. We need to get back to listening and communicating with the land and animals so that we can care for our homelands and each other in a good way. The deep relationship we have with the land goes beyond sustenance. The land and animals are our teachers, and though the trails may overgrow, they are never forgotten. At the core, this work provides space for relationship repair, and this is significant to supporting the well-being and cultural protection of who we are as Gwich'in. The effects of colonization, and especially the impacts of the Canadian Indian residential school system, have caused significant injury to relationship within my communities. Our people have told us they want opportunities to be on the land, that this is where they feel their best. Our youth have stated that they crave their culture. They crave this connection to the teachings and values. The youth are breaking the cycle of intergenerational trauma and starting the healing journey. Healing starts on the land, and guardianship programs provide a natural space and systems for these connections to occur in the way that they were intended to. This work provides space and opportunity for authentic experiences to be shared within community and promotes the strengthening of knowledge transfer and relationship building. Returning to the land in this way provides space for intergenerational healing, and this is integral to the well-being of my people. Repairing our relationship to the land strengthens our Gwich'in values and worldview. Our connection to the land is good medicine. It defines who we are as Gwich'in and restores our identity as we reclaim our values and ways. Relationship with the land has a ripple effect, and this is significant as it is relationship that defines who we are. When we have a positive and strong relationship with our surroundings, with our environment, with our community, with our families, we will have a stronger and healthier relationship with ourselves. And this is the foundation of well-being. Guardianship programs provide a vehicle that leads to preservation and care of our land, water, and wildlife. It is also preserving our language, our cultural practices, and the Gwich'in way of living. This land is where we will awaken and strengthen our identity, and this is where we will learn what it means to be Gwich'in. Well-being is built on reciprocity and in the teaching that we all have a responsibility to uphold the care of our land, our animals, our people. And this is how we maintain and protect our well-being and cultural longevity. Masi.
Masi. You know, I'm going to turn to Grand Chief Lafferty and ask, you know, you're here at COP and you have an audience here, and what really would you like to leave them with in terms of your experience with this process, and how can it help strengthen your nationhood as the Gwich'in?
Masivel, that's an excellent question. And I quickly add that the Nakatron, Yazitone, Gashion, the Dundazo, Yazanli, in Daza Quetta, Gashintina was a Sia, Natani, not sure one gets a Dazande, on Taduna get the Gishe, on Tagishe, and Sayiga, Damasi, the Fonte. So I just said in my language about partnership. It's all about collaboration. And Indigenous-led projects I've heard over and over, and involving community members, and also being at the table, making a decision. So this is a tremendous opportunity for us in the Northwest Territories, for my provincial government, to empower Indigenous people and government with the financial resources to take control of our land and water. NWT PFP is an ambitious target and also undertaking in the Northwest Territories. It's fairly new to us, but at the same time, we're willing to work with it. The NWT PAP process is shaped in a unique landscape of the Northwest Territories, unlike other jurisdictions. We are diverse Indigenous governments across the Northwest Territories, governments and also organizations. The strength of this opportunity is its recognition of Indigenous governments across the board that needs to be at the center of these projects on the go. Indigenous leadership is what will achieve the best outcome, the best targets. And the Indigenous leadership will ensure that this work is done right way, respecting the diverse of our each nation, our community, and our people, our Indigenous laws, governance, and way of working together. The NWT PAP process, it's a path forward, one that respects the local context of each Indigenous governments, recognizing the different priorities of each communities, each region, and each of us, while working on broad collaborative partnership that we've heard over and over during this discussion here. We have taken time to develop a collaborative way of working which balances everything. This way of working sets out a path that can succeed in the diverse landscape of the Northwest Territories. So as an Indigenous government with modern treaty and established self-government and co-management authorities, Clinton government has many tools that we can use to protect and manage our lands and also the resources in the Northwest Territories. And for the Clinton and many other Indigenous communities and people, we are already doing a crucial work on the land program, on the ground, but we also lack the resources, sufficient resources, to fully realize our vision. But through partnership, which was announced last week by Prime Minister Trudeau, this is becoming a reality, working together. So through partnership, we can achieve many great things. We're interested in partnerships that respects and also advance the self-determination, self-sufficiency, and our government to government, organizations to organizations, building relationship as we continue to take care of our lands, our waterways, and move forward on economic self-sufficiency. The NWT PAP could be a powerful tool, a powerful partnership to harness the potential for the great Northwest Territories. It could provide a crucial resources to Indigenous governments, organizations, to help us realize our vision of the Northwest Territories for the future and the benefits of our people and the whole world to see. As Clinton, we will continue to keep the well-being of our people now and also to the future at the heart of all our decisions. And we know that our well-being relies on the healthy land, water, and wildlife. Masicho.
Merci, Grand Chief. And Charla, you know, what would you want this audience to be left about your experience in this process, if there's one thing, and how does it strengthen Gwich'in nationhood?
So in Gwich'in culture, one of our most powerful ancestors is a man by the name of Atachukai. And I was raised learning of his adventures and traveling the land. He communicated and connected and cared for the animals, the water, the air, and the land. So this isn't a new system. You know, systems of guardianship and stewardship is the cornerstone of Indigenous governance, well-being, and society for millennia. These systems were interrupted and pushed to the side as primitive or irrelevant since the colonial system was established and assimilation and extraction became the goal. So this is an opportunity for non-Indigenous governments and other partners to join in allyship, in real action for reconciliation, and in learning the complex intricacies of Indigenous science and ways of being. Our Earth needs a new way of doing things. Humanity needs a new way of doing things. And this process is not only beneficial for Indigenous communities, it's it's beneficial for everyone in this room and the world over to look at land management and living in partnership with the land in a different way. So this process aligns with GTC values and processes and our objectives of reclaiming and strengthening our way and our values, and this is the ultimate goal. This new way of relationship is a two-eyed seeing approach where Indigenous governments and Indigenous knowledge is finally the priority and in the driver's seat. And that is the message I would like to leave with everyone here today. That is how we need to move forward. Masi.
Merci. Dr. Kelly, what final thoughts would you like to offer about the potential of the Northwest Territories PFP process and opportunity in leading the world towards a more hopeful future?
As you've heard loud and clear from all of the panel members in the Northwest Territory, the land, air, water, and animals are fundamental to Indigenous culture and the well-being of all of the people in the Northwest Territories. Protected areas and other effective area-based conservation measures not only conserve the land, but also generate opportunities in other sectors such as the economy, culture, and health. Often the most biologically diverse areas are also the most culturally rich areas, providing long-term opportunities for the development of a diversified economy through important cultural, recreational, and educational activities, tourism opportunities, and other income derived through land-based activities. A balanced conservation network and associated economy is an effective and equitable way to ensure the NWT's cultures, land, and water stay healthy for future generations. Protecting biodiversity maintains Indigenous food systems and supports access to a traditional economy, thereby sustaining Indigenous culture and strengthening social systems within communities. Just as healthy communities can provide strong leadership in response to climate change, protected areas can also support both Indigenous well-being and reconciliation commitments to Indigenous peoples. The PFP could potentially apply to social envelope initiatives across the Northwest Territories, addressing NWT needs that are much broader than just conservation. For example, the fund could support skill development programs, language and culture programs, on-the-land mental health and addictions programming, employment in small communities, food security, and economic diversification initiatives. I notice we're getting tight on time, so I can I'll just have a couple more points. The PFP could also lead to increased research and community-based monitoring, ultimately improving knowledge of climate change and other environmental issues in the Northwest Territories, and could also support the initiatives that green the NWT economy. In the face of the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change, effectively managed protected areas and conserved areas are needed, but current funding is not enough to cover existing needs or to increase those areas. The PFP would provide Indigenous governments and organizations additional resources to continue to protect and steward the land as they have for generation upon generation. And the GNWT is excited to be collaborating on this innovative funding initiative and looks forward to working with our Indigenous partners to ensure a thriving NWT that realizes a balance between conservation and sustainable economic development.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kelly. And I've been told we could bleed a little bit since the next event is also a PFP event that we're all involved in. So I'm hoping we could, great. The boss said yes. Wonderful. Nicole, what gives you hope about this whole process?
Oh, hope. That's a big question. I have hope because, as I said before, the partners are at the table. There's an openness. No one's hiding behind their particular perspective or value. It's all on the table. So to me, we've got all the right ingredients. This PFP, this model in the NWT, elsewhere, is a way forward in my mind. It is a new way of doing conservation that is much more integrative. And so to me, that's the hope. You know, we are not going to achieve 30 by 30 without our partners, without a new way of doing things, without a different way of seeing things. So I really love the terminology two-eyed seeing, because it opens our eyes wider than they are as ourselves. And I think that is what gives me the hope, is that we are finally looking at something that integrates all of the pieces in one place. And with that, I'm very optimistic that we're going to find success. And even through the difficult conversations that inevitably will happen, because we are a group of people and we are human, we have developed the relationships with each other, with the land, that's going to catapult us to new sort of areas of conservation and reconciliation.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And Sandy, what are your final thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience with about the potential of the PFP process in the Northwest Territories and in leading the world towards a hopeful future?
Well, I know we're tight on time, so I won't repeat any of the reasons for why this approach makes so much sense. It's been said very eloquently by many other people on this panel. I think what the PFP promise is that it creates a really high likelihood of actualization at scale. For the first time now, we really have a chance to put real energy under the potential and take this up to a landscape level and show the country and ultimately the world why this way of working can achieve results that are far beyond anything that we did previously. And that's enormously exciting. So already in Canada, there's 4. There's many others around the world, and I think the eyes of the world will be on the Northwest Territories first. It's the furthest one along. It's enormously ambitious. It's deeply evolved. So it has the opportunity and is perfectly positioned to basically set the tone and show the possibilities of what an actualized Indigenous-led vision for a landscape can actually look like. And I think that's enormously exciting. And I think we can imagine within the next couple of years that the promise of PFPs will be firmly rooted in Canada and will be being watched with great interest and enthusiasm by the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. And Danny, you'll get the last word here. What gives you hope in this process, and what do you want? What are your final thoughts about all of this?
The Gashotan support the NWT PFP because it helps us promote who we are, and it gives, and PFP has potential, and also we're trying to keep our identity, and that's really important to us, because if we take away the land, you take away the food from the land, you take away our spirituality, you take away the water, we kind of lose our identity. So those are the things we kind of really fight for as to who we are. And also that includes our language too. And I know we don't have much time here, but I'll just make it real short and sweet. And the loss of our cultural and knowledge is that teaches us safe travels on the land, who we are as Dene Gashotan, our language and our knowledge, our ancestors is our foundation. It is our pride. It is also what keeps us safe on the land and what helps us protect and monitor the land, the forests. This is perhaps the most important part of what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. In my language, I say Chinish Kumit now. Thank you to all of you. This has been a wonderful panel. It's been an honor to be here with you tonight. And just before we leave, we have a short video, and I hope that you enjoy it. It's really about all of the wonderful values and visions that have been spoken about here today. So again, Chinish Kumit now. Thank you.
Land, language, and culture are at the center of what we want.
We're trying to bring back lost art, things that we were losing.
Guardians puts the majority of our resources into gathering and collecting stories from our elders
They're like our library. If our library dies, everything's going to go with it. And we are just trying to get as much knowledge from the elders because that's what's keeping us together.
The knowledge that they hold would provide us baseline for a lot of the work that we are doing, research, monitoring, camps that we hold.
Program stemmed from the elders. The things they stressed strongly was protecting the wildlife, the fish, the animals. We try to protect it as best we can. And so we learn how to do modern stuff like water sampling.
We do a lot of data collection. The elders help us a lot, pointing us out to different trails.
Recently, we just had a camp. It was so awesome to see everybody coming together and the elders coming there and telling us stories. You're just sitting there and you really want to understand what they're saying, and it just makes you really want to learn the language.
My job as a culture and language specialist, I try to see that we involve language in all our activities and all the programs we do. We're each playing a role so that this could be understood by mainly the young people and anyone that needs to or wants to learn. It's given me a chance to be on the team to show that I can actually do the work, not just for the community, but for the outside world.
To learn their culture, involving the youth and the elders, coming together and being like a family makes me really proud.
Merci.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Canada Pavilion at COP15, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Lauren Small, and I am the Director of the Canada Pavilion for Environment and Climate Change Canada. Bonsoir à tous. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue au Pavillon du Canada à la COP15 et merci de vous joindre à nous aujourd'hui. Je m'appelle Lauren Small et je suis la directrice du Pavillon du Canada pour Environnement et Changement Climatique Canada. This is the second of our series of PFPs. C'est avec plaisir que je vous présente le deuxième événement aujourd'hui organisé par l'initiative de leadership autochtone, projet de financement pour la permanence, un modèle transformateur pour soutenir la conservation dirigée par les Autochtones à travers le Canada. I am pleased to introduce today's second event hosted by the Indigenous Leadership Initiative, Project Finance for Permanence, a transformative model to support Indigenous-led conservation across Canada. The event will be moderated by Hilu Taguna. Hailing from the central Canadian Arctic, Hilu has extensive experience in community development and environmental review processes. She is a member of the Nunavut Magiletagi, an independent NGO that informs Nunavut residents and the impacts of uranium mining, and is on the board of Mining Watch Canada. Hilu has also represented Inuit nationally and internationally. She has presented a United Nations seminar on the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, helped craft the Native Women's Association of Canada's input on the Canadian Impact Assessment Act, and assisted Europe's largest science agency with integrating local knowledge into Arctic research. Hilu is a mother of 2 young adults and has her BA from Carleton University. Just a few reminders before we start our session to please put your phone on mute. S'il vous plaît, mettez vos téléphones cellulaires sur sourdine. If you need to have any interpretation, we have interpretation, Nicolas, in the back. Donc, on a des écouteurs pour l'interprétation simultanée avec Nicolas en arrière. The presentation will be in English, and I will please join me in welcoming Hilu. Thank you.
Matnaluavik. I'll do my land acknowledgement in Inuktitut. Tamani tiluta tiotia kinunani koyalivugut. Ujjerusuk pugut kanin kihaka dam nanuna kamagitang matuk. Tape sumani lukta kativyu laukto. Kanini haka hodino sani mutanit. Huron wendat mutanit. Abenaki mutanit. Amma Anishinabeg mutanit. Tungasuk titaw gapta, nunakakak tuvinit, kalung neaktil lugit, matnak pugut. Tonight you will hear from 6 teams that either have or are in the process of advancing Indigenous-led conservation within a framework called Project Finance for Permanence. The best way to understand this unique tool is to hear about it firsthand. Let's start with deals signed on a global scale from Brazil and Costa Rica. I'm proud to introduce Rosa Lemos de Sá. She has been the Secretary General of the Brazilian Biodiversity Fund since January 2010. With over 30 years of experience in biodiversity conservation and climate change, she has participated in national and international programs to protect biodiversity, reduce deforestation, and curb CO2 emissions. Under her leadership, FundBio has increased its portfolio and became a national implementing agency under the Global Environment Facility in 2015 and for the Green Climate Fund in 2018. Previously, she led the Moore Foundation's Andes Amazon Initiative between 2006 and 2009 in the US and worked for WWF Brazil for 10 years, holding the Director of Conservation between 2003 and 2006. Graduated in Wildlife Management from the University of Wisconsin, Rosa has a master's degree in ecology from the University of Brasilia and a doctorate in wildlife ecology and conservation from the University of Florida. Rosa is a member of the following national and international councils: Associação Mico Leodorando, WCS Brazil, Rare Brazil, and Green Fund and Planafor Program, Please welcome Rosa.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation for being here talking about the AHPA program. The Amazon Region Protected Area Program, short AHPA, it completed 20 years this year. It's a 20-year program that took 5 years to design and negotiate. At the time, it was a very audacious and very ambitious program to work in protect the Brazilian Amazon. It is a government program, but it has all the donors involved here: WWF, KfW, GEF, the World Bank, IDB, the Moore Foundation. Those donors have been with the program for 20 years. They have been supporting the program for all this. And yeah, I think it is, I'm sure it was the seed for the PFPs. That's when the idea of PFPs started. The program today supports 120 protected areas in the Amazon that add up to 62 million hectares. That's about the size of 2 Germanys. So it is a very ambitious, and it was very hard to negotiate, but it's a program that it's very successful as well. Those are the protected areas that AHPA support in the Brazilian Amazon. The green ones are federal areas, and the orange ones are state areas. So it involves negotiations and work with 9 different states, plus the federal government. If you look at this map, only shows the AHPA areas, but there's a lot of other areas that complete this map and create large corridors, both in the south and in the north of the Amazon. There are indigenous lands and other protected areas that are not supported by the program that complete the image there. But those are the 60 protected areas that work. And the main thing, and why it was so hard to negotiate, because it's a government program run with donation from different donors, but run by a private institute. FUNBIO is the financial mechanism that manages the money. So the money from AHPA does not go into the government. It is directed to FUNBIO, and FUNBIO manages those resources. The governance of AHPA is what makes it so successful. The donors have a committee that makes the major decisions in terms of investment, and the government, it's part of this discussion, but the donor committee has control of the program, if you will. So it has gone through 7 different presidents, a number of environmental secretaries and ministers, and the program has never stopped. Not even in the last few years where conservation was not a priority in the country, the program continued to run successfully. In 2012, we actually start a new fundraising for AHPA. And I think now this is a already formed PFP. That's when we decided that a endowment fund would never be large enough to maintain the 60 protected areas, the 60 million hectares of protected areas. So we studied and calculated how much money would you need to consolidate all those sites in how long a time. So there was a study that documented that we needed $215 million to carry out conservation in all those sites, consolidating all those 120 sites, and that would take us to 2039. So an effort was made to fundraise all this at once. That's when the single closing came up. That there was an effort to fundraise $215 million, commitments all on the table, and that's when the transition fund started. And it started with the premise that the initial investment from the donors would be high. I don't know if I can, if there's a, no, sorry. There's no pointer in this, right? No. The $250 million is the orange portion of this graph. On the bottom, on green, you have the government, federal government budget. Above it, a state budget. The light green are new mechanisms that we should develop to get new resources coming into the budget. And the transition fund, as you can see, starts investing large amounts, and the government slowly will increase its budget. So by 2039, all the money, the donation money, will have been applied to the protected areas, and the government will have taken 100% of the cost of those areas. It's an average of 3% increase in the government budget per year. That's not very much. It's doable. And the governments have been increasing their budget. We monitor them. They have to report that amount that it's disbursed. And we have, in the time that the project was created, it created more than 24 million hectares of new areas in the Amazon. So it is the largest tropical forest conservation program ever, and especially because it's running for 20 years. So this is ARPA in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
So interesting. Thank you, Rosa. Next, I'm glad to introduce Katie De La Garza. She is the Executive Director of Forever Costa Rica Association. She has worked in rural and international development, intercultural education, conservation in Latin America for over 20 years. Previously, she was the Dean of International Honors Programs at the School for International Training and has held upper management with Televisa Foundation, the Nature Conservancy Costa Rica, U.S. Peace Corps Costa Rica, programs for Women Mexico, and the Costa Rican government. Katie's areas of interest and expertise include sustainable livelihoods, rural community development, social entrepreneurship, transformative education, and microfinance. She holds a doctorate in international education, a master's in international development and management from Columbia University, and a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Affairs from Georgetown University. Please help me in welcoming Katie to the stage.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me. And I'm Costa Rican, so I'm freezing. As you can tell, I'm wearing all this stuff. So we're going from one of the biggest PFPs to one of the smallest ones. So I represent Forever Costa Rica, and we were created 12 years ago as the fund that was going to administer the PFP. But let me first situate you just to. So Costa Rica is in the middle of the Americas, right? We're like the waist, exactly at the little waist before the hips in the American continent. And just to show you, we have more than 160 protected areas, so just to get a sense of where that is. And also, our country is like 52,000 square kilometers. And one of the things that worked, right, like for 2010, when we began for this to happen, was we had a bunch of donors that were kind enough and visionary enough to come and support us. And for our partners like TNC, which was our lead, we had the Moore Foundation, the Walton Foundation, Linden, the US government, and the Costa Rican government that all came together and said, we're going to help the country meet the CDB goals. At that point, it was the Aichi goals. So we wanted to protect 10% of our marine territories and 17% of our lands. And we had already met the land requirement, but not the marine one. So the goal of the PFP was to support the government in meeting the CDB goals in perpetuity. So that's the power of it, but like the forever. That's why we have the forever in our name. So the donors came together, the stakeholders, and we raised $57 million in 2 endowment funds. So one was a debt for nature swap between the US and Costa Rica, and the other one is called the Forever Costa Rica Trust. And that's where the operating budget also comes from so that we could begin operations. And so the trade-off, we did this in 3 years. So some PFPs take a long time. And so we did it, the speed was the trade-off for, and I'll just put another slide here. So the speed was what actually, because we wanted to do it so fast, because the government was willing to do this, we did not involve the communities. So initially, communities were not involved. So that's something that we began to do much later, and that we're doing now, 12 years later, right? But it began until 2017 that we actually began to administer the first debt for nature swap between the US and Costa Rica, and that one was outside of protected areas. So that's when we finally began to incorporate the communities, which is very different than what's happening here in Canada, that is actually led by the Indigenous peoples. So something that's just really important is that we had to leverage funds. So we began to, also the goals changed, right? We have the 30 by 30 goals, and we began to leverage funds after 2017, and we've leveraged more than $15 million for a program we're calling our Blue and Green Economy Program. And just some lessons learned as we look back. We didn't know how much time we had for today, so I have a little bit of a short presentation, but if not, we can do questions afterwards. Is just to stay flexible. I mean, goals change, donor priorities change, governments change, but we are here to stay. So that's the power of this framework, right? That people rotate, funding needs rotate, but we're there to stay with the government. Also, it's really important to strengthen local capacity to absorb the funding, especially in small countries like the one that we come from. Also, the staff in protected areas need to be, to have the skills to work with Indigenous peoples and local communities. That's something that has been something that we have to be able to leave those skills and co-lead together. And another thing is just to continue fundraising. Just like Rosa was saying that they did like another push, we have to do the same and to make the government accountable. Each government that comes in, they have to we have to make them accountable for the conditions that they signed up for in like 12 years back. And something that's really important is to share with other PFPs. So I'm really glad to be meeting you because right now we had the Belize doing a PFP and also Mongolia, and they came to visit us in Costa Rica, and it's a perfect time for us to reflect on where we are right now, 12 years in, and also for them before they go into creating a PFP just to learn from our lessons. So I hope that this is a community of practice that we can keep on answering each other's questions and supporting each other as you build these. So thank you.
Thank you. It was very interesting. In the background, we were already planning an exchange meeting in the Arctic to, thank you, meeting in the Arctic to do an exchange. All the PFPs in the world come together. We have a new unique opportunity to hear from Great Bear Sea, and the uniqueness of this is that this is where PFP started. We're bringing it back home to Canada right now. We're going to hear from Merv Child, who is a member of the Zawadanoks First Nations. He is currently the Executive Director of the Non-Wokolos Council. Merv also co-chairs the Coast Solutions Task Group that supports 17 North Pacific Coast First Nations in the development of the Great Bear Sea PFP. Merv is a 1994 graduate of the Faculty of Law at the University of Victoria and was called to the British Columbia Bar in 1995. Merv spent a total of 11 years as a director and a board chair for Coast Funds and the Indigenous-led conservation finance institution established as part of the world's first PFP. It's called the Great Bear Rainforest PFP and is with the Haida Gwaii. We're excited to welcome you. Thank you.
I was going to bring my camera up and take a picture of you. Maybe I'll do that when I leave because my kids will get a big kick out of that. But firstly, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening here in Montreal. I'm here on behalf of the Coast Solutions Task Group, which you just heard leads the Great Bear Sea PFP deal team on behalf of 17 nations up in the north coast of British Columbia. Just so we don't have a map. But if you can picture the coast of British Columbia, the PFP we're talking about stretches from 2/3 of the way up, maybe 3/4 of the way up Vancouver Island, takes in the central coast, the north coast, and the Haida Gwaii areas, and the adjacent marine environment. So if you could picture that in your head, this is the area that we're talking about. So I'm very happy to be here today to give you a very quick overview of the vision that we have for the Great Bear Sea PFP. This vision flows from our communities. Our First Nations, as all First Nations have, they've governed and managed their lands and waters for thousands and thousands of years. When we exercise our stewardship authorities and responsibilities, everybody benefits. People and the environment benefit. And not just Indigenous people, but the broader community benefit as well. And we have the track record to prove it. And I just want to speak to that a bit. So many of you have heard about the Great Bear Rainforest Agreements from 2006 and 2007. These agreements dealt with the terrestrial component of our territories. Through those agreements, over 3 million hectares of land were protected, created into conservancies. They were protected against forestry. 3 million hectares of ancient temperate rainforest ecosystems were protected. But that wasn't all. In addition to that, 6 million hectares of the rest of the territory, essentially, were put into ecosystem-based management framework that, since that date, have been collaboratively managed between the First Nations and the provincial government of British Columbia. Since 2008, as part and parcel of those agreements and the implementation of them and the resulting PFP, over 1,200 new jobs have been created in that region. And if you've ever been to that region, 1,200 new jobs is huge. Over 122 new businesses have been created in that area. The regional economic diversification of that region has intensified dramatically. And benefits have flowed to the communities and to the family members there. The quality of life has improved over that time. That's what we mean when we say Indigenous-led conservation works for nature and for people. That public-private durable finance partnership model that created the Great Bear Rainforest Agreements and made those results possible has since become recognized as the world's first PFP. Back then, when we were negotiating this thing and implementing it, never heard the term PFP before. I didn't hear it until like a year and a half ago, and I go, hey, that all sounds familiar. So that first PFP, what it consisted of was $120 million, 60 of which was raised by the private private funders. That word always gets me. And the other 60 million was split between the provincial and the federal governments of British Columbia and Canada. In terms of the private funders' dollars that were brought to the table, I just want to take a quick second to acknowledge the representatives from TNC and the Canadian affiliate Nature United who are here today. Back in the day, TNC did a lot of the heavy lifting in bringing together the $60 million in private funders. So without TNC's heavy lifting back then, our PFP would not have got off the ground, and I don't know if these others would have gotten off the ground eventually later. So to the folks at TNC and Nature United, thank you very much. So right now we have the opportunity to take the next step forward. And the next step forward is taking that PFP and that model and bringing it to the marine portion of our nation's territories. Our marine territories encompass some of the world's healthiest remaining seas with globally significant habitats and species. Our nations have spent the last 10 years plus, at marine planning tables with the governments of Canada and the governments of British Columbia. Through that work, we've meshed our Indigenous knowledge and expertise with cutting-edge ecosystem science to develop the world's largest Indigenous-led marine protected area network that will be nested within bioregional scale plans for collaborative governance and ecosystem-based management. Overall, our PFP will help restore Indigenous governance and stewardship authorities across our marine territories and will link the management of land to the sea. As with the Great Bear Rainforest Agreements, our plan includes a core network of protected areas within a broader ecosystem-based management framework. We're aiming for a marine protected area network that will deliver bioregional conservation targets of 25% by 2025 and 30% by 2030. Based on our past experience, we expect our marine conservation and sustainability plans will create new jobs and new businesses across the region. So, some of our preliminary work are estimating, in excess of 3,000 new jobs in that area. We'll be driving transition to a sustainable blue economy, investing in the health of our people and communities, and demonstrating practical models of reconciliation in action. This is not a wish list. These forecasts are based on our proven track record of 15 plus years with the initial PFP and coast funds. We have 15 years of experience with landscape-level conservation, collaborative ecosystem-based management, and Indigenous-led conservation finance. And our Great Bear Sea PFP will build on all of this. Our nations have the experience, institutions, and the structures in place to deliver a PFP closing by 2025. And we're looking forward to getting down to and doing this work. But before I close, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge my friends here with me today. The 4 Canadian initiatives that you're going to hear about, well, the other 3 you're going to hear about, we've come together over the last couple of months and we're working together. All of our initiatives are unique to our respective territories and homelands. But if I may, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think there are some key principles that run across all of our PFPs. And the first is that the right to manage and benefit from lands and waters can never be separated from the responsibility to care for them. 2, that the health of people can never be separated from the health of the lands and the waters. 3, that the people best placed to protect and steward ecosystems are those closest to buy. Indigenous people have thousands of years of ecological knowledge and management expertise. And 4th, that the restoration of Indigenous authorities and stewardship responsibilities benefits everyone. The land and the sea, people and nature, our communities, all of Canada, all of the world. What we see is that Indigenous-led conservation is not only about protecting nature, it's about reconciliation, prosperity, and a better future for all of us. Leaders from around the world are here in Montreal last week and this week to craft new targets to protect nature and biodiversity. But we don't just need new targets. We need new approaches based on those 4 principles. The initiatives you see on the stage today are the model that the world needs now. So today, together, we represent a globally significant moment. When you combine the strength and determination of the leadership you see here, the scale of the conservation opportunity our initiatives represent, the ambition reflected in Prime Minister Trudeau's significant commitment last week, and the support of leading conservation funders from Canada and around the world, we have something that is truly unbeatable before us right now. So together, we can galvanize a worldwide movement that puts Indigenous-led conservation and reconciliation at the heart of global nature protection efforts. Thank you for listening to me and joining us in this work.
Thank you, Merv. I have to stand up and talk after that. Wow. That was very good. The communications and collaborations that have been happening with the teams that you see in front of you has been exceptional to watch and to see. So it's very, very exciting to be a part of this, and the commitments that are coming from Canada and from all the partners around the world is phenomenal. I'm really excited to make and honored to make this next introduction. For most of the people in the room, I'm sure you know Nunavut used to be a part of the Northwest Territories, and so I grew up seeing and knowing our next panelist as a leader in our former territory the Northwest Territories. The Honorable Ethel Blondin Andrew, Privy Council of Canada and Order of Canada, is Shutoatine Mountain Dene from Tulita, Northwest Territories. She is a senior leader and much valued colleague of the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. In 1998, Ms. Blondin Andrew was the first Indigenous person to become a member of the Privy Council and Cabinet. She served as Secretary of State, Training and Youth from 1993 to 1997, Secretary of State, Children and Youth from 1997 to 2003, and Minister of State, Northern Development from 2003 to 2004. Notably, she gave her first House of Commons speech in the Dene language and supplied her own interpreter. Ms. Blondin Andrew chaired the Satu Secretariat Incorporated, a land claims organization, for 9 years. Throughout her career, she has raised awareness and advocated for Indigenous peoples, children, and people with disabilities, and the inclusion of Indigenous communities in the development of national, regional, and labor market programs. Ms. Blondin Andrew is married to Leon Andrew, who is in the room with us, and has 4 children and 4 grandchildren. Please welcome the Honorable Ethel Blondin Andrew.
Masi. Masi is a Dene word that says thank you. I thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Hilu, Matna, Juana. Yeah. We have many different diverse groups in the Northwest Territories, as we do in Canada. I'm especially proud to get the opportunity to have watched a panel before, touch on a lot of the issues that we would be speaking about. Gracias. Thank you for both your presentations. I would like to say that in all the years of experience I've had as a bureaucrat, as a teacher, as an educator, in the years while I've been in Parliament, I spent 17 years in Parliament and 13 of those in Cabinet. I've become a very good listener, as well as I'm an okay talker too. But I just wanted to say that opportunities like this are very grounded in real things. The PFP in the Northwest Territories is not only a collaborative thing, it's also a transformative series of things that happen and change. The Indigenous communities and regions in the Northwest Territories are leading the way in biodiversity and stewardship. That's why Indigenous governments of the Northwest Territories are leading a collaborative partnership with the GNWT, the Government of Canada, and private donors. These partners are committed to working together towards a territory-wide PFP initiative. I guess to say those words, it rolls off easily, but to actually do the work, to actually make it happen, it's just a series of ongoing meetings and reworking of language and reworking of intentions and figures. Believe it or not, you know, there's some heated moments and there's some very learnings, very much learnings in all of the activity that happens in developing these partnerships. We've gathered everybody in trying to work towards a territory-wide PFP. The journey is underway, and seemingly we are all heading in the same direction. Centering the NWT PFP is quite an exercise. The NWT PFP will support transformative benefits. There's change in all of that. The centering of the NWT PFP on Indigenous leadership ensures transformative outcomes for people, lands, and waters. It will support these types of activities. Community well-being, I think I heard that already, and healing, stewardship of protected and conserved areas, meaningful management practices for biodiversity and species at risk. We're very committed to the well-being from a food sovereignty and food security perspective about the management of our caribou, our fish, all of our other wildlife, including our birds. It's a full-time occupation. We're also looking at diversified economies. We talk about conservation economy. It's something that really needs to be explored and continued. There are opportunities there that are unexplored yet. We also need to look at progress on reconciliation. We have a lot of work there. I come from a community, most of us were educated in residential schools. Most of us were educated away from home, taken away from home to other centers. And, you know, there's also some communities that are lucky to be very, very homogeneous in a way. They have one setting of speakers, and there's other communities that are diverse. And we are looking at the revitalization of our language and our cultures with some of the groups, and we're looking at a continuation of the work that's happened with the elders and with the educators in our community through time. Taking care of the lands benefits our communities. We talk about place. We talk about working together to protect culturally and ecologically significant areas. Our vision is more than protected areas. It's an actual way of life. That's when it's real. That's why this PFP will change lives on the ground, and benefits will ripple out across families, communities, the region, and the world. The NWT PFP will support Indigenous governments' ambitions in conservation. There are no silver bullets. There is no magical answer. There's hard work, there's determination, there's reconciliation, there's collaboration, and transformation. Let's be real about this. It can be done, but those efforts have to be sustained and they have to be done in partnership. Our interests in conservation and protected areas go beyond hectares. It is about ensuring our cultures and a way of life thrive into the future. Indigenous governments in the Northwest Territories have been developing effective strategies to respond to climate change and ensure a healthy landscape for the next generations. The PFP will support Indigenous leadership on the land, and it will also help achieve significant territorial, national, and global conservation gains. This is about working together for the future, our future shared. And I always remember this elder we had. He's gone now. And he always used to say, "Unda nazon keodati." He said, "The future looks good. Keep up the good work." Thank you very much. Merci.
Masicho. I think the message that we're receiving from our panelists here is that there's going to be so many negotiations yet to come with these proponents, and they're going to have to negotiate within their territorial or provincial governments and along with the feds. But the understanding also is that they're also negotiating within and communicating within. There's community engagement occurring. In some of these places, there's multiple rights holder organizations that need to be engaged and also work within this type of tool that we're using, this unique tool. And so it's really exciting, and the amount of work that's going into each PFP is phenomenal. I'm going to move, I don't know if you notice, I'm going west to east over here, so moving further east, I'd like to introduce Vern Chicho. Vern is of Cree ancestry and a proud member of the Moose Cree First Nations. His community is located on the southern shores of James Bay in northeastern Ontario. Vern is a highly talented manager who has served in various roles for the Mushkegowuk Council for over a 20-year period. He has a BA in political science and sociology and a certificate in community, economic, and social development. As a director of Lands and Resources, Vern is responsible for the strategic direction of the Lands and Resources arm of the organization, and mandated by the chiefs of the 7 First Nations that make up the Mushkegowuk Council. He has successfully negotiated several funding agreements with the federal and Ontario governments. He has also developed partnerships with several environmental non-governmental organizations and foundations who are supporting the Mushkegowuk Council in pursuing conservation and protection of the largest wetlands in North America of approximately 133,000 square kilometers. Also under the directorship of Vern is the National Marine Conservation Area Feasibility Study in partnership with Parks Canada to protect 91,000 kilometers squared of western coastal regions of Hudson and James Bay. Please help me to welcome Vern Chicho.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Elvis. Happy to be here and acknowledge the folks that have already spoken and the experience that already exists here. In our region, the Mushkegowuk Council, we're the newest PFP. Just announced in October 14th. So we're the baby of the family. Thank you. Yes. And, but I feel like we're not going to be treading new waters because there's lots of experience here that we can pull from in moving forward with our PFP in the James and Hudson Bay region. As was mentioned, the region contains the largest wetlands in North America. It's said to be the 3rd largest in the world, and it houses the 2nd largest carbon sink in the world with, I've heard all kinds of numbers, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 gigatons of carbon is stored in this region. And according to Ontario's research, the carbon flux monitoring that happens in the north, they say carbon is still coming into the region. And I often joked with them that said, we should put a taximeter on there so we know how much to charge you for all the carbon we store in our territory. And it's an immense region, and our people have been calling for protection of the environment over many years. Our tribal council started in 1984, and when we did a look back at the resolutions that were passed over the years, at the annual General Assemblies of the Nations. In 1989, they called for a tribal conservation authority to be established. And it is now that we are looking at these resolutions and going to begin to enact them as we begin to have further and more recognition of the work that we want to do in our region to protect the wetlands, also the waters, the Hudson James Bay, the 91,000 square kilometers of water that provides many habitats for all kinds of species of fish, birds. It's a very important bird area. We have billions of birds that come to this region. It's a staging area, and in the fall, late fall, when the migration is happening, the birds going south, they say there's about 3 to 5 billion birds flying south from this region and other parts further north. But it's a very important region that needs to be protected, needs to be looked after. We are of a goose culture. That's one of our main staples in our region. And just to let you know some of the impacts of climate change and also development, because development is also a threat, to this region. We used to see millions and millions of geese in the fall come to the southern James Bay region on their way back south, right? And but because during the spring migration north, there's areas in the U.S. where they would stop to feed before they continued to our region, and the areas that they stopped are now being developed. They're, basically their habitats in those regions have been ruined. So they've changed their flyway. And so when they changed their flyway, when they return, they follow that same flyway back. So they don't come to our region anymore. When we go out in the fall to hunt geese, when I was a little kid, we used to see, like I said, millions of geese. We didn't have to go far down the river towards the bay to hunt these geese, but nowadays you can go there and you could hear a pin drop. There's no sound of geese or anything, so that's part of the impacts that are happening in our region. So, but much more, is happening in terms of the melting of the permafrost. We had a presentation here yesterday on the Winisk region and how permafrost is melting, and the banks of the river are dropping into the water and impacting on the river system. They used to have barges that come to that region and other regions in the. Do you have any water? It's really dry here. Some water, if you don't mind. Another minute? Oh, I need more. But yeah, so those impacts are happening within our region, the melting of the permafrost. But I also want to acknowledge the partners that we've been working with over the last 3 years. And the different NGOs and foundations that came forward back in 2020 when Paul Crowley, sitting right here, worked with me, advising me and helped me, because the premier, the Ford government in Ontario took all our funding away and stripped away our programs. we had developed over the 3 years previous. And when I came back to work, I was on leave and came back to work, and ended up it was just me. I was by myself, and I went to Hudson Bay Consortium here in Quebec 4 years ago to talk about the wetlands and things like that, and that's where I met Paul. Paul volunteered to help, and then we organized a workshop of all the different NGOs and that to come together, Oceans North being a big part of that, WWF, WCS, they were all came together, also committed funding to help with the conservation work that we wanted to do in this region, and bringing attention to the wetlands and the significance of this region. And Oceans North, about a year ago in January, started to talk to us of a potential, this area being a potential PFP. So that's when we started to work on, the feasibility study to get it, and lo and behold, we are here. We are part of the PFP family now. All right, thank you.
It's been such an honor to work with Vern. For those of you who don't know, he's quite the musician as well. So on Wednesday night, we had the honor of listening to Vern and Lawrence's music, which was wonderful. I think we're going to need to make a PFP song once this is all said and done. Bringing you further east, I'm going to introduce a fellow Inuk. Like many other Indigenous nations, our creation stories are based on conservation, the land, the waters, the animals, and paying respect to them at all times if we want wellness within ourselves. And I think it's rooted in all that we do. I'd like to introduce Richard Payton. Richard recently moved into the senior director role of projects at Qikiqtani Inuit Association, which is a rights holder group in eastern Nunavut. Richard joined Qikiqtani Inuit Association in July of 2020. He's an accomplished communicator, leader, and strategist. Previously, he held senior management positions within several departments of the government of Nunavut, and was recently the Chief Executive Officer for Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated. Please help me to welcome Richard.
Hilu. So thank you for allowing me to speak. I think being at the end of the row, I have work to do on my bio. Significant sitting at the table with the individuals that are here in front of you today. So I'm very happy to be able to speak to you today about the Qikiqtani Inuit Project for Permanence. Throughout discussion tonight, I speak and reference the Qikiqtani Inuit Association's 2022 Regional Conservation Approach. I have about a dozen copies with me. If you meet me in the foyer after, I'm happy to give those that would like a copy. Otherwise, it can be found on the Qikiqtani Inuit Association's website on our front page. To give you a bit of perspective on our organization, we serve an Inuit population of just over 16,000. In our region, we are essentially the largest Inuit population in Canada. And just referencing my colleagues that are here today, our region is larger than the province of British Columbia. We are more than twice the size of California, and with Vern, we are home to the millions of birds that migrate north. So from a broader perspective of who we are one of the largest private landowners as a result of the Nunavut Agreement, with approximately 175,000 square kilometers of surface rights Inuit-owned lands. So the scope of our Project for Permanence, or PFP, for the Qikiqtani region aligns well with our regional perspectives and the 5 pillars that we have within it. Inuit-led governance is of significant importance in the region, and a regional approach is fundamental to governance. We have a stewardship program, our Nautik-Sutit, that are the eyes and ears of stewards and stewardship on the ground. We recognize the importance of sustainability and the funding needed. As long as there's a desire to conserve, there should be a mechanism to ensure that funding matches that desire to conservation. And fundamental to ensuring program delivery is the ability of infrastructure to house programs and to allow our guardians to work on the equipment that they use while out on the land and in the waters. But I would say for Kikitani Inuit, fundamental to a PFP approach is the ability to have a fisheries reconciliation. And I'll speak to that in a bit. But our PFP bridges a Kikitani regional model and a desire to speak through an Indigenous lens. And so Inuit at the forefront are critical to moving not only a project for permanence forward, but conservation in our region. And I can say that for Kikitani Inuit, we have already contributed significant space that includes national parks, migratory bird sanctuaries, national wildlife areas, and national marine conservation areas, such to the point that we have over 20 varied conservation mechanisms in the region already that contribute just over 600,000 square kilometers in our region today. When you consider conservation targets, and there needs to be recognition that over 90% of Kikitani waters are recognized as ecologically and biologically significant, and it has a tremendous impact towards protection of the estimated 46 billion metric tons of blue carbon stored within Kikitani waters, and this represents 26% of Canada's carbon offset. So in our approach, we've asked Canada, in making contributions towards the Kikitani PFP, should be immediately seen as targeted outcomes. Changes to the way our region addresses food security, food sovereignty, while providing Inuit with a food choice through harvesting of our sustainable environment and contributing from within the conservation economy through our Nautik-Sutit program. We seek a fisheries reconciliation agreement that includes support for a new Made in Nunavut fisheries sector policy, while collaborating with communities, the Government of Canada, the Government of Nunavut, and public donors to confirm additional protected areas and marine conservation measures over the next 2 years. And just to end, to be clear, our regional approach includes outcomes of over 1 million integrated Inuit-led ocean area management, fisheries repatriation linked directly to conservation outcomes through an Inuit-based, sustainably managed fisheries, which includes over 195,000 square kilometers in proposed new protections that translates into 1/3 of the final commitments on Canada's 25 by 25 goal. And it's through this Inuit-led approach that we would end up with a vast mosaic of conserved and protected area designations, protection for an intact, iconic, globally significant, and a climate vulnerable ecosystem that supports many critical marine mammals, birds, and are critical to Inuit cultural continuity and the ability to pass on Inuit knowledge from generation to generation. And so while we see the significance and celebrate the announcement of the over 800 million towards Project for Permanence in Canada, we know that we have a lot of work to do. We have, a 2-year process for the Kikitani region that seeks a whole of government mandate that aligns with both our proposal and the funding announced and agreements prior to 2025. So as a member of the PFP cohort here today, we're eager to immediately advance in a partnership with our communities and those around the table that seek tangible improvements for Inuit and the region as a whole, and certainly together in achieving a mosaic of unparalleled environmental protection while diversifying Nunavut's economy. Kuinimik, and thank you.
I believe we'll be closing up here and can perhaps go into deeper conversations as we leave the space, but I'd like to take this time to acknowledge how much work can be done with all the way from the south, Brazil, Costa Rica, to the high Arctic, to Bayuito, you know, like this is amazing. And on Turtle Island from the far west to the far east. This is some really great work that can be done towards 30 by 30, and acknowledging that this is coming from Indigenous people that care passionately about this and are leading these opportunities. There's great things to be seen and be done in the next couple of years, and it's already represented in a lot of the work that has already been done in some of the other PFPs. So thank you so much to all the people that are helping to make this happen, people from the donor community, philanthropists, to the governments that be, and most especially the Indigenous people that are rolling up their sleeves and getting the work done. Thank you very much. Matna.